Elias Crow sat alone in the small room of the remote space outpost, the hum of the station's engines filling the silence. The room was sparsely furnished, with a narrow bed, a metal table, and a few shelves holding jars of old medicines and tools from his days as a war medic. He had not expected company tonight or any night. After decades of service, he had retired to solitude, hoping for a quiet new year, away from the chaos and memories of the battles he had survived. Outside, the station lights flickered softly, marking the countdown to midnight. Elias leaned back in his chair, sipping a lukewarm cup of tea. His hands, still steady despite his age, rested on the table. The war had taken much from him, but it had not taken his sense of duty, even if it was no longer needed. He thought of the years gone by, the soldiers he had treated, and the wounds he had healed. Yet now, here, in the quiet of the outpost, he felt like a relic, a man with skills that no one needed anymore. The soft chime of the station's countdown echoed faintly. 10, 9, 8. Elias closed his eyes and let out a quiet sigh. Perhaps this was how it was meant to be, a new year without fanfare, without excitement, without responsibility. Just him and the empty silence. Then came a knock. Heavy. Deliberate. It was not the tap of a human hand or the gentle rattle of a small visitor. It was strong, filled with weight and urgency, echoing through the metal corridor. Elias's eyes snapped open. He had not expected anyone. He rose slowly, muscles stiff, and walked to the door. The knock came again, louder this time, sending a shiver down his spine. He opened the door cautiously, peering into the corridor. At first, he saw only darkness and the faint glow of the station lights. Then, moving from the shadows, a large figure emerged. It was a dragon, a mother dragon, massive even in the dim light. Her scales shimmered in muted gold and deep bronze, and her eyes held exhaustion and fear. Cradled carefully in her claws was a tiny, fragile hatchling. Its scales were dull and its breathing was shallow. Elias's heart tightened at the sight. The dragon's voice rumbled softly, deep and melodic, yet urgent. "Please," she said, tilting her head toward him. "Help my child. It is sick. No one else can save her." Elias felt a strange mixture of fear and awe. He had treated humans, soldiers, and other species before, but dragons were powerful and unpredictable. And yet, here she was, standing before him, vulnerable and pleading. I can try," he said slowly, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. He had faced death and danger countless times, but this was different. He had no orders, no backup, just his old medical knowledge and a sense of duty he could not ignore. The dragon nodded and, with careful trust, stepped aside, lowering the hatchling into his waiting hands. Elias felt its tiny body shiver, weak and fragile against his own. He carried the hatchling inside, placing it gently on the metal table. The mother dragon crouched nearby, her wings folded but quivering with anxiety. Elias examined the little creature carefully. Its breathing was shallow, and its small chest rose and fell with difficulty. He had seen patients in worse condition, but dragons were not humans. Their biology was strange, powerful, and complex. He would have to adapt, think quickly, and trust his experience. "What's wrong?" the dragon mother asked, her voice soft but urgent. "It stopped eating. Nothing works. No healer can save it." Elias nodded, his mind racing. He could see the signs: dehydration, weakness, pale scales. The hatchling's life was fragile, and every second counted. He reached for his old medical kit, brushing aside jars of supplies, and began preparing what he could. He measured small doses, checked temperatures, and tried to calm his own racing heart. The mother dragon watched silently, her large eyes never leaving him. Elias felt the weight of her trust pressing on him, heavier than any armor he had worn in battle. He could not fail, not this time. He worked methodically, cleaning wounds, checking breathing, and carefully adjusting a nutrient mixture that might sustain the hatchling until it could recover fully. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. It was hard to tell in the quiet of the room. Outside, the station continued its low hum. Inside, the small room was filled with the soft sounds of breathing, rustling scales, and the faint metallic scent of the outpost. The hatchling twitched slightly, then gave a tiny, weak chirp. Elias's heart lifted. It was small, fragile, and uncertain, but it was alive. The mother dragon let out a soft, almost imperceptible sigh of relief. "Thank you," she said. "I feared it would be too late." Elias shook his head gently. "Not yet. We'll do what we can. It's not over." He adjusted the hatchling's position, keeping it warm and comfortable, and then looked at the dragon mother. "I need your help too," he said. "I need to know how it eats, how it sleeps, anything that will help me keep it alive." The dragon lowered her head, wings twitching. I will stay. I will guide you. For the first time in years, Elias felt a spark of purpose he had not known since the war. He had expected a silent new year, a night of solitude. Instead, he had been given a task, a life to protect, and a chance to do what he had always done best: heal. As the countdown reached 0 outside, marking the first moment of the new year, Elias looked at the hatchling, fragile but breathing, and then at the dragon mother, exhausted but trusting. The station lights flickered softly, casting long shadows in the small room. For the first time in a long while, the new year felt alive, filled with hope and responsibility. Elias realized then that this night, this knock, had changed everything. The past, the wars, the solitude, all of it faded for now. There was only the task before him: to save a life, to honor a trust, and to begin a new chapter he had never expected. The old war medic had been ready for silence. Instead, he found purpose, and a dragon mother waiting beside him, her hatchling in need. Elias Crow worked quietly, his hands steady despite the tension in the room. The hatchling lay on the metal table, fragile and shivering, while the dragon mother watched from a corner, her eyes wide with worry. The tiny creature's chest rose and fell unevenly, and its small scales were pale, lacking the shine of health. Elias had treated countless soldiers, injured humans, and even alien species during the wars, but dragons were something else entirely. Their bodies were stronger, more complex, and far less understood by human medicine. Yet here it was, a life in his hands, and he could not walk away. He examined the hatchling carefully, checking its breathing, heart rate, and temperature. Its small body was weak, nearly failing, and Elias realized the challenge was greater than he had expected. The creature's digestive system was delicate, and it had gone without proper food for too long. Dragon medicine, at least the knowledge available to the mother, had failed. That meant Elias had to find a solution using what he knew, and it would have to be gentle, precise, and fast. He rummaged through his old medical kit, pulling out small syringes, heating pads, and tiny feeding tubes. The hatchling needed fluids and nutrients immediately, but in a way that would not overwhelm its fragile system. Elias mixed a simple solution of minerals, sugars, and small proteins, thinking carefully about each step. He had done field medicine in war zones, improvising under pressure, and he drew on every lesson he had learned. The dragon mother's eyes followed every movement, her wings tucked close but quivering with anxiety. It has refused to eat," she said softly. "Nothing works. It cries for food but cannot swallow. No dragon healer could help." Elias nodded, understanding her fear. He had seen hopeless cases before, but somehow he believed this hatchling could survive if he worked carefully. He began slowly, gently introducing the nutrient solution with a small tube. The hatchling flinched at first, weak muscles struggling, but Elias kept his movements calm and steady. "Easy," he whispered. "Just a little at a time." The tiny creature let out a faint squeak, then accepted the feeding, trembling but alive. Elias felt a surge of relief. It was fragile, yes, but it had taken the first step toward recovery. Hours passed. Elias alternated between monitoring breathing, adjusting warmth, and feeding in small amounts. The hatchling's chest began to rise more evenly, and its tiny claws flexed. Every small sign of life felt monumental. The dragon mother remained nearby, offering soft murmurs and nudges of encouragement. Elias realized something important. The hatchling needed more than medicine. It needed trust, calm, and care. He worked through the night, adjusting techniques and doses, watching carefully for any sign of distress. Each time the hatchling stirred or made a small cry, Elias felt a mix of fear and hope. He was teaching a fragile body to survive, to heal, and to trust again. Dragon biology was different from anything he had studied, but the principles of care remained the same: patience, observation, and small, steady steps. By dawn, the hatchling had made progress. Its scales had begun to regain a faint sheen, and its breathing had stabilized. Elias wiped his brow and leaned back for a moment, feeling the weight of exhaustion and relief. The dragon mother chirped softly, wings fluttering. She moved closer, watching the tiny creature with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. It is alive," she murmured. "I did not believe it could survive. Not now, not like this." Elias shook his head gently. "It is alive because we did not give up. That is all that matters." He adjusted a small blanket around the hatchling and checked the temperature of the room. Comfort and warmth were just as important as nutrients. He noticed the subtle rise and fall of the tiny chest, steady and more confident now. He had stabilized it, but recovery would take time, patience, and constant attention. The station remained quiet outside. No one knew of the small miracle happening inside the tiny shop-like room of the outpost. The hum of engines, the flicker of lights, and the faint metallic scent of the table were the only witnesses. Elias thought of all the soldiers he had saved, all the injuries he had treated during the wars. He realized that the skill had not left him. Even after years of solitude, he could still make a difference. The dragon mother shifted closer, her massive form surprisingly gentle in the small room. You are human, she said, her voice soft but filled with awe. Yet you have done what no dragon could. Why do you care so much for one small life? Elias smiled faintly, shaking his head. Because it is alive. And because I cannot turn away when someone needs help. That is all the answer you need. By the second day, the hatchling had grown noticeably stronger. Its tiny wings twitched, and it moved its head with more energy. Elias fed it carefully, always in small amounts, and continued monitoring its condition. The mother watched constantly, but she also began to trust him, seeing that his hands were steady and his heart genuine. Elias realized something profound. Healing was not just about medicine or biology. It was about attention, patience, and the willingness to see value in a fragile life. The hatchling had survived against odds that seemed impossible, and the human medic had made the difference. He felt a sense of purpose he had not known for years. The wars had ended, but his duty had not. By the evening of the second day, the hatchling let out a faint, stronger cry. Elias's heart lifted. The sound was small, but it was a sign of life, of progress, of trust. The dragon mother chirped softly in reply, relief and gratitude shining in her eyes. Elias looked down at the tiny creature and whispered, "You are stronger than I thought. We'll keep going. You will survive." For the first time in many years, Elias Crow felt hope rise within him. He had expected a quiet new year, solitude and silence. Instead, he had found life, purpose, and a fragile trust that could not be measured in words. He realized that even a body that seemed too weak to survive could thrive with care, patience, and determination. The hatchling stirred again, blinking up at him, and Elias knew that the work was just beginning, but it was a beginning worth every effort. Days passed slowly in the quiet space outpost, but inside the small room, life was stirring. Elias Crow had grown accustomed to the rhythm of caring for the tiny dragon hatchling. Each morning began with careful feeding, warmth checks, and gentle observation. The hatchling's scales had regained some of their natural shine, its chest rose more evenly with each breath, and it had begun to chirp softly when Elias approached. The dragon mother, Arela, watched constantly, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and cautious hope. Elias had almost forgotten the weight of responsibility he once carried as a war medic. Back then he had treated humans, soldiers, and other species in desperate situations. But now he faced a life so fragile that even one wrong move could cost it. He adjusted the feeding mixture carefully, slowly introducing new nutrients, and monitored every twitch of the hatchling's tiny claws. His hands were steady, his mind focused, and his heart quietly filled with purpose again. Then came the first signs that their quiet sanctuary would not remain secret. Outside the room, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. At first, Elias thought it might be one of the station workers. But the sound was too measured, too deliberate. He paused, listening. Another set of steps joined the first. The soft, careful tapping of claws against metal. His heart began to race. The door opened slowly, and two adult dragons stepped inside. They were larger than Arela, their scales a mixture of silver and deep green, and their eyes carried caution and suspicion. Elias froze. He had expected the dragon mother to trust him, but he had not expected a visit from other members of her kind so soon. Elias Crow, one of the dragons rumbled, voice low but firm. "We heard of your actions. A human healing a hatchling? This is unusual." Elias stood tall, though his stomach twisted. "I am helping," he said. "The hatchling could not eat or survive without intervention. I am only trying to keep it alive." The other dragon stepped closer, nostrils flaring slightly. "Humans are not trusted among dragons," it said. "Your kind caused pain and war. Why should we believe you care?" Arela moved protectively closer to the hatchling, her wings partially unfurled. "He is helping. I have seen it," she said firmly. "No dragon healer succeeded. Only he has given my child hope." Elias took a slow breath, recalling battles and difficult decisions from his past. Humans and dragons had fought long ago, and mistrust ran deep. But here he stood, in a quiet room on a distant outpost, trying to heal life instead of harm it. "I know humans have caused fear," he said calmly. "But I will not let it continue here. I will not abandon this hatchling. Not now, not ever." The adult dragons tilted their heads, observing him. Elias could feel the tension in the room, but he remained calm. He focused on the hatchling, who chirped softly and moved its tiny head toward him. There was trust in that movement, a trust no one could force, and it spoke louder than words. "You understand its fragility," the silver-scaled dragon said finally. "And yet you continue. That is remarkable." Elias nodded. "Life is worth saving no matter who or what it is. I have seen enough death to know the value of care." For a long moment the dragon studied him silently. Then the green-scaled adult stepped back, lowering its head slightly. "We will watch," it said. "Do not fail it. If you do, there will be consequences." Elias felt a wave of relief. He knew the dragons could have reacted with anger, suspicion, or even hostility. Instead they had agreed to observe. That was enough for now. Arila chirped softly and nudged the hatchling against Elias's arm, her trust in him unwavering. Throughout the day, other dragons arrived quietly, curious and cautious. Some were older, some young adults, and they all watched from the doorway, learning how this human medic cared for a life unlike any they had encountered before. Elias continued his careful work, feeding the hatchling, adjusting temperature, and monitoring every movement. He realized that their presence, once intimidating, had become a lesson, for both him and them. The hatchling responded to the attention, growing stronger and more alert. It chirped happily, wiggled its tiny wings, and even tried a weak hover with Elias's careful support. The dragons watching could not help but notice the progress. Their eyes softened, and some even murmured among themselves. The impossible was happening. A human, once enemy in legend, was saving a dragon's life. By nightfall, Elias paused for a moment, letting the hatchling rest on a small blanket. He looked around at the gathered dragons and the exhausted mother. "It is recovering," he said softly. "With patience and care it will survive." Arila lowered her head in gratitude. "You have done more than we expected," she said. "You have proven that humans can be more than war and destruction." Elias felt a strange warmth, not from pride but from purpose. The past, the wars, the pain, the mistrust, was still there, but it no longer defined him. He had faced it, and here in this small room, he had chosen life and trust over fear. Outside, the station continued its low hum, indifferent to the quiet miracle within. Inside, life thrived under careful hands, vigilant eyes, and a human heart willing to bridge the gap between species. The hatchling chirped again, stronger this time, and Elias knew that the past, though present, could not stop the future. For the first time in years, the old war medic felt hope rising. He had faced distrust, the echoes of ancient conflict, and the judgment of dragons, but he had endured. And as the hatchling stretched its wings weakly, Elias realized that healing could bring understanding where war had only brought pain. The night ended quietly, but a new chapter had begun. The past had returned, yes, but it could no longer dictate the present. Elias Crow, human medic, had proven that even old hands and weary hearts could change lives, and that trust, once earned, could survive even the deepest scars. Elias Crow had grown used to the quiet presence of dragons watching his work. Each day more of them arrived, curious and cautious, observing how he cared for the small hatchling. Some adults perched near the doorway, wings folded but eyes alert, while Arila stayed close, her trust in him unwavering. The hatchling, now stronger and more alert, chirped softly whenever Elias approached, stretching its tiny wings with tentative energy. Elias studied the creature carefully. Its body, though improving, was still fragile. Dragon biology was complex, far different from human or even alien species he had treated in the past. He realized that the methods he had relied on during the war, quick treatments, injections, rapid stabilization, would not work here. The hatchling required gentle care, careful observation, and a new approach that combined what he knew as a human medic with what he had learned from watching Arila. He began to experiment cautiously, taking small notes in his mind as he fed, warmed, and tended to the hatchling. The key was balance. Enough nutrients to sustain growth, but not so much as to overwhelm the delicate digestive system. Warmth was crucial, but so was movement. Tiny stretches of the wings encouraged circulation and strength. Elias had once thought he knew healing, but here he was learning something entirely new. Arila watched silently, occasionally chirping advice. Elias paid attention. He realized that dragons had traditions and instincts that humans could not fully understand. But human knowledge, patience, observation, measurement, could complement their instincts. Together they could achieve what neither could alone. Elias felt a thrill he had not known since the days on the battlefield: discovery, understanding, and hope. He adjusted the hatchling's feeding schedule, creating a method that gave small amounts frequently, allowing the tiny body to absorb nutrients without strain. He experimented with warmth and gentle movement, discovering that combining heat pads with careful wing stretches encouraged muscle growth. Arila watched every step, her trust growing as she observed the hatchling respond positively. Word spread quietly across the outpost. Other dragons began to arrive, some bringing their own hatchlings, some just curious. They perched respectfully, watching Elias work with steady hands and a calm voice. At first there was tension. Dragons were naturally cautious, and humans had long been seen as dangerous. But each day they saw progress, hatchlings gaining strength, scales brightening and chirps growing louder. Slowly, curiosity turned to respect. One day, a young adult dragon named Varian approached. His green scales shimmered in the light as he lowered his massive head near Elias. "I have never seen this before," he rumbled softly. "A human, helping a hatchling, surviving the attention of other dragons? Why do you do this?" Elias looked up from the hatchling, whose tiny eyes followed his movements. "Because it is alive," he said simply. "Because it needs care. And because I know what it is like to need someone to help you when the world seems to have forgotten you." Varian studied him carefully, then lowered his head. "Perhaps humans can learn to care beyond war," he said. "Perhaps healing can come in ways we never expected." Elias continued developing his methods. He combined observation with experimentation, noting how hatchlings reacted to different feeding textures, warmth levels, and gentle motions. Arila occasionally nudged him, showing subtle signs of dragon instinct he could not replicate on his own. Each day the hatchlings grew stronger, chirping more confidently and attempting weak flutters. Their parents began to relax, seeing the results for themselves. The process was slow, careful, and sometimes exhausting. Elias worked long hours, feeding, cleaning, and monitoring. But he felt a renewed sense of purpose he had not known since the wars. Here he could save lives not with weapons or strategy, but with patience, understanding, and a willingness to adapt. His skills were alive again but applied in a way he had never imagined. By the third week, the hatchling's scales were brighter, its movements stronger, and its chirps bold and energetic. Elias smiled as he watched it stretch its wings for the first sustained flutter. Arila chirped happily, nudging the tiny creature proudly. Other dragons watched quietly, their eyes softened by the evidence of care and dedication. Elias realized that healing was not about force or control but about balance. By combining human medical knowledge with dragon instinct, he had created a method that worked where neither could succeed alone. It was not magic, not luck, but careful observation, patience, and compassion. He had discovered a new way to heal, one that bridged species and traditions. Night fell over the outpost, but inside life thrived. Hatchlings slept peacefully on blankets warmed by pads, wings folded neatly. Adult dragons watched respectfully, understanding the process without needing to interfere. Elias cleaned his tools, reflecting on the progress. The small room, once quiet and solitary, had become a center of learning and trust. He knelt beside the hatchling one last time before sleep, stroking its tiny head gently. "You're stronger now," he whispered. "And soon you'll fly on your own." Arila leaned close, her golden eyes soft. "You have done what no dragon could alone," she said. "You have taught us something important." Elias felt warmth rise in his chest. For the first time in years, he understood that purpose could be found in unexpected ways. Healing was more than medicine. It was attention, care, and the willingness to learn from others. He had begun a new chapter, not only for the hatchling but for every dragon who would witness and learn from his work. The old war medic had expected a quiet life in solitude, a new year without disturbance. Instead, he had discovered that even an old hand, even a weary heart, could create a new way forward. A way that could heal, teach, and inspire beyond the boundaries of species. And as the hatchlings rested, wings tucked, breathing steady, Elias knew that the work was far from over, but that the path he had found was one worth following. The past might linger, but healing had begun, and it would continue in ways that no one, human or dragon, could have imagined. The night before the new year was quiet across the space outpost, but inside the small room where Elias Crow worked, life was stirring. The hatchling, now stronger than it had been when he first found it, rested on a soft blanket, its tiny wings twitching occasionally. Arila, the mother dragon, hovered close, her golden eyes glowing softly in the dim light. Other dragons had begun to visit regularly, watching Elias care for the young, and slowly trust had begun to grow between human and dragon alike. Elias moved quietly around the room, checking feeding tubes, adjusting warmth pads, and noting the hatchling's reactions. Each small movement, each chirp, told him that the tiny dragon was ready to take the next step. Its chest rose and fell steadily, and its small claws flexed with newfound strength. It had survived against odds that seemed impossible, and every day, it grew more confident and alert. Elias could hardly believe the transformation. Arila chirped softly as Elias approached. "It is time," she said. "It must try." Elias nodded. He had been waiting for this moment, though he also felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. A wrong move could harm the hatchling after so much progress. "We will do this carefully," he said. "Step by step." He gently lifted the hatchling, supporting its fragile body with both hands. Its wings twitched as if sensing the challenge ahead. Elias whispered softly, calming it, reminding the tiny creature that it was safe. The other dragons watched from the doorway, silent but attentive. Some were adults, their eyes wide with curiosity and awe. Others were older hatchlings, chirping softly among themselves, learning from the human who had shown patience and care beyond what they had expected. Elias felt a quiet pride, though he kept his focus on the task at hand. He positioned the hatchling near a soft mat in the center of the room. "Try to move your wings," he encouraged. The creature wiggled, then stretched one wing slightly, then the other. Elias guided its movements gently, supporting the tiny muscles until it could hold itself upright. Arila chirped encouragement, nudging the hatchling forward. With effort, it began to flap, trembling but determined. Minutes passed. The hatchling's wings twitched more confidently, and it made short, awkward hops across the mat. Elias clapped softly, careful not to startle it. "Good job," he whispered. "You're stronger than you know." Arila chirped joyfully, nudging the hatchling lovingly. The other dragons in the room watched, some tilting their heads, others whispering among themselves. They had never seen a human achieve such a thing with dragons before. Finally, with a determined chirp, the hatchling lifted slightly into the air. Its wings caught the light as it hovered briefly before settling down again. Elias felt his chest swell with relief and happiness. The creature had not only survived, it was beginning to thrive. Arila lowered her head and brushed the hatchling with a gentle nudge, her eyes shining with pride and gratitude. "Elias," she said softly, her voice full of awe, "you have done more than I imagined. You have saved my child. You have shown that humans can care, truly care, beyond the memory of war." Elias shook his head, feeling a quiet warmth. "It was not just me. It was patience, observation, and trust. And your guidance helped too." The station's lights flickered as the countdown for the new year began outside. 10, 9, 8. Elias glanced at the hatchling, its wings twitching with energy, ready to face life. The small dragon made a soft, clear chirp, louder and stronger than ever before. Elias felt a lump in his throat. It was the first sign of true strength, the first clear cry of life and resilience. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. The station lights brightened briefly, but inside the room, the real celebration was quiet, full of life. The hatchling chirped again, lifting its wings slightly, and this time hovered a few inches above the mat. Arila's joy was evident in her gentle movements and soft sounds of encouragement. The other dragons watched silently, some nodding slightly, their respect for the human growing with every passing moment. Elias leaned back, exhausted but elated. He had expected a quiet new year, a night of solitude and reflection. Instead, he had witnessed life triumph where it had seemed impossible. The hatchling's survival and newfound strength were proof that care, patience, and determination could overcome even the deepest doubts. Arila stepped closer to Elias, brushing his hand with her nose. "Thank you," she said simply. "You have given us hope." Elias smiled. "No, you gave hope to all of us. This hatchling showed me that even old hands and weary hearts can make a difference. Life matters no matter how small." The hatchling chirped again, stronger and more confident, moving its wings in short flutters. Elias watched it carefully, knowing that each success would build the foundation for a long, healthy life. He had saved one life, yes, but in doing so he had begun to change the way humans and dragons could see each other, beyond fear, beyond war, toward trust and cooperation. Night faded slowly, and the quiet of the station settled over the room. The hatchling curled beside Arila, breathing steadily, wings folded in rest. Elias cleaned his tools, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. This night had proven something powerful. Even in solitude, even in the quietest moments, humans could make a difference and trust could be rebuilt between species. The first day of the new year had begun, and with it, a new chapter for dragons and humans alike. Elias Crow, the old war medic who had expected only silence, had witnessed the first cry of the new year not from machines or alarms, but from life itself, vibrant, resilient, and full of hope. He looked at the hatchling one last time before resting, smiling softly. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. "We will keep going together." Arela nudged him gently as if agreeing. The hatchling stirred slightly, chirping, and Elias knew that trust, care, and patience had triumphed. The new year had arrived, and with it, life, hope, and a future that no one could have imagined.